Amen. So we're looking at the Millerite history, and where we raised some of the material out. We went from 1798 to 1840, that's as far as we've got, which is 90% way into the history. There's still many things I want to talk about this. Hopefully we'll have time. We made a demarcation, Miller and Litch, and we said, essentially, Miller has a question mark surrounding his studies, whereas Litch, everything's confirmed. And what's confirmed is Miller's work. So I'm going to put M here, questioning Miller's work, and here I'm going to put M as well, because Miller's work has now been confirmed. We can see that. But this is Litch. But Miller's correct. Miller we're questioning. The questions are fair and reasonable. That's what I want to say. And they're fair and reasonable because there's no evidence. And he can't just say, well, have faith. Why can't you have faith? Because faith is built upon something that you have had personally in the past. Some kind of interaction with God. So here, in 40, Litch is going to say, something's going to happen in August. He prophesies it here, and when you're here and it comes to pass, then that's where that tick is. I've marked it here in this dispensation, but the tick should be here, if we're okay with that. Then we made some application to that. How will that apply? And we had a really nice explanation. We put it over here. I think it was Brother James that gave this to us. We're predicting what? The Sunday law. We've been predicting the Sunday law for the last, I'll say 30 years, since 1989, perhaps not, perhaps a little bit later, but we'll just mark it like the Millerites do, 1798. And how does anybody know it's correct? Because we've had these eloquent, long-winded arguments that it's the history of the judgment of the living and the latter rain, and all of those arguments, and yet this movement is extremely small, and Adventism is relatively large. You know, it's 20 million people. You know, we're not even at 4,000 or 5,000. If you take the numbers, it's extremely small. And why is it so small? Why are the numbers so small? Who's to blame? Let's blame people. Yeah? Because we should judge. We're supposed to make. Whose fault is that? Is it because we're incompetent? Is it because those people are just disgusting, horrible, lazy people who hate God? What's the problem, Sister Ruth?
I guess I'll talk from my experience in our own.
Before you talk from your experience, talk from the principle or the line that we've generated. What is the problem?
So I guess the problem is that they have not seen an evidence of what we have seen.
Good. You can give your testimony?
So our testimony is different from you.
That's fine, yeah, but you said something about your church, so I want to listen.
Yeah,
I want to hear.
So in our church, we've been there and we've been trying to share with the brethren. We have done Bible studies. We have tried that on a forum, and we feel like the resistance comes from preconceived ideas, and especially a few individuals who have been to theology school that totally disagree with what we try to put forth, and they seem to carry a lot of people with them. So, that's in a nutshell.
Do you have preconceived ideas?
I must say yes.
But perhaps not the same ones? Perhaps other ones?
Yes, different.
So we'll...
I believe that they, by God's grace, that like preconceived ideas also, they're falling off.
Your ones?
Yes.
Yes, yes. And we live in hope that their ones will as well. So the big problem is that there's no evidence. There's no evidence of a Sunday law. What is the evidence for the Sunday law, Brother James?
Signs of spirit prophecy quote and Bible verses, or?
Yeah, no, not any of that. The one that you gave us. What is the evidence?
Well, it's happened before.
The line that you gave us. It's not there now. I mean, the one that was over here that we rubbed out. When we sort of made some kind of application, I said it's not a real proper line. You remember what you did? Anybody remember what he did? What was the evidence that he said? Raphia. He said Raphia is the evidence. Once Raphia comes and goes, then we'll have the proof. Then we can say, look at that. You see that? And I agree with that. So they need proof. So when we spoke about all of that, then we came to our own line, the line of the priests, and we're saying what's about to come. Remember, David? What's about to come? What are we predicting?
We're predicting Raphia.
We're predicting Raphia. So how can any of us believe it? We need some proof. And I'm suggesting, could be wrong, that the proof was 2014. Now, if someone comes up and says, by the way, half of your message was all wrong in 2014, or about 2014, that should be of immense concern to us. Because if 2014 was the proof, and half of it's all wrong, where does that leave you with respect to Raphia? In a dangerous position. We can all see that. Yeah? So we'll leave it there. So we started having the conversation about half right, half wrong. Sister Effie did a presentation for us on half right, half wrong, and she showed us a number of histories, a number of lines, and so just I'm not even going to do anything in any detail, but I just want us to see one point, because she said something, or her model was saying something, and someone asked a question, and I'm not sure if the question to me seemed to indicate that they didn't fully understand what she was doing. Now, in our school, have we done the tension, the dichotomy between progression and repeat and enlarge? Have we done that? I can't remember. I've got a feeling we didn't, because I normally do that at one of the earlier classes, so we didn't. So what Sister Effie was doing, she had one line, and I think people were inferring or suggesting that there were multiple lines that she was talking about, like the Millerite line and the 1888 line. And it's just one line. So there's one line of the true. And then she gave us another line of the counterfeit. And she gave us examples in these histories. So what she did was that I think perhaps tricked certain people, was to say in this line there are 3 dispensations. 1, 2, 3. And in the counterfeit line there are also 3. And so if this is the Millerite dispensation on this line, and this is the 1888 dispensation, this is the 144 dispensation, what she was doing was mapping them this way when she was trying to line them up. So if you're going to this history here and you want to compare this history with something, you do line upon line and you'd compare it with this history. So she had Benedict and Francis here, yeah, because this is the line of the counterfeit, and this one was what dispensation was this? Brother Jeffrey, did you pick it up? No. Sister Julianne, this middle history for the counterfeit. Sister Annabelle, Sister Catherine, sorry. Brother, sorry? What is this? This is 1888. If that was blank and I said, what dispensation is that? I put given his diocese 1888. So what's this one, Brother Douglas?
That is Pacelli. When it comes for pass, that's the middle one?
Yeah. So I don't want to call it Pacelli. I want to give it a much easier name.
A rejection? This is
What's the book that's named after him? Pope Pius XII.
yeah, the
Who's Pope?
Hitler's Pope.
Okay, so what history is this?
That is World War.
Good.
World War II.
So this is World War II. Okay? And so she gave this history before this, and then she gives this history afterwards. So depending on how you approach these lines, if you're going to do this line upon line, no, let me not draw it that way. Like this line upon line, you need a pair of scissors and cut this. Yeah? If you cut it, then you can do line upon line. And you can do this one with this one also. But she didn't do that, and I think people thought she was doing that. I think people thought, well, hold on, why is this not line upon line? Because she was making this as a singular line of progression. So there's this tension between progression and repeat and enlarge. And we always have to be careful how we approach that. So when you do line upon line, what can you not have in a line of progression? Sister Rachel? You can't have line upon line. Or, I don't know if, maybe I want to inject my phrases on it. So I don't know if you watch what can't you have? Anyone? Repeat. So I normally use the word typology. You can't have typology in a line, which means you can't have line upon line, and you can't have repeats. Are we okay with that? So, you're not okay with that?
I mean, I agree, but if you can just explain it a little bit more, is what I mean, I guess.
Who agrees? Okay, line upon line. Well, how many lines is that? It's only one line.
It's one line.
So how can you have a line upon line if it's only one line? This is not a line. So if you want to kind of think, it's not quite fractals, but this is the time of the end, and this is the time of the end. Yeah?
Yes.
Is that the time of the end or not?
It is.
It's not.
In one sense, isn't in progression.
In Sister Effie?
Progression. It can't because it's one line. It's progression. That's one time.
It's 1989 as this abstract waymark. It's not the time of the end on a line of progression. You can't have repeats because repeat is typology or line upon line. It's difficult to juggle the two concepts, but once it becomes clear in your mind, it really prevents you from falling into pits. So if I did this becomes the time of the end.
Okay, that's what I'm about to say.
If you cut the line, it becomes the time of the end. But if you don't cut that line, and if it's this cannot be the time of the end. Sister Effie? I didn't hear you. And you said?
I was just saying because the dates are still going, time is still going, so there's no way we can come back to, it just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work. This is 1989, this is 1798. So when you do this, you begin to see why Ellen White doesn't talk about any of these waymarks. She has no understanding of them. She's not using line upon line like we're using them. For whatever reason, God doesn't want to give us that information because it's saved for us. So the only point I wanted to pick up here was depending on how you approach the story, depends how you get your answers. If you cut them, you can do a whole heap of things. The question is, are you allowed to cut them? And the problem is that the Millerites, they said Jesus was coming. Did he come? No, he didn't come. So they failed. They failed in the 1888 history, and Lord willing, we're saying we're going to pass. Fail, fail, pass. If you go to this history, we see the same. Fail, fail, pass. You can pick this up in various ways. If you just look at Francis, you know, there's clues. What's his name? Not his original name, his Pope name. Francis, yeah? Francis the what? What number? No, if it was second, it would say Francis, two strokes on it.
Francis the First.
His official name is not Francis the First, it's just... Okay, why would he not say Francis the First? Because there's not going to be another one. He's making a statement. It's a prophetic statement that no one's coming after me. If you look at his name, what his name... I don't mean like his dictionary. What his namesake is, where he comes from. Francis of Assisi. When you look at what his job was, you can draw characteristics of what this Pope's going to do. He's a Jesuit. If you look at the tension of the Jesuits from the beginning of the 20th century and the work of the Jesuits in Central America, there's good research on that, how the Jesuits in Central America were diametrically opposed to the Catholics in Europe, in Italy. They were at war with one another. And John Paul II, what was he? Was he a Catholic or was he a Jesuit? Who did he love? Catholic. He hated Jesuits. He had a real problem with them. Because the Jesuits, what would we call them in our church context? Backsliders or? Liberals. We're calling the liberals, the Sadducees. They're the liberals, and John Paul is a hardcore conservative. Not what you might think. You might think these Jesuits, they're gung-ho for God. They're the conservatives. No, they're the liberals. And by the way, when you do that, and you say conservatives, liberals, if you do that in the Catholic Church, and the liberals are who? The Jesuits. If you start applying, and we haven't done parable applications, we haven't done enough of that in this week. A week's not long enough to do everything. I'm sure you've all heard, I suspect some of you might even believe that there are Jesuits in our church. You know, undercover Jesuits. You've probably read booklets on those things. You've probably heard conspiracy theories about that. You know all of that has to be wrong, because when you compare and contrast the counterfeit with the true, what does the counterfeit look like? It's got conservatives and liberals. What have we got in our church? The same. Who are the liberals in that Catholic Church? The Jesuits. So you can't have, they don't have three parties, so you can't come to our church and say you've got the liberals and the conservatives and Jesuits. Because who would be the equivalent of the Jesuits? The liberals. There's no room for Jesuits in the church. Parable teaching straightens out a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of foolish conspiracy theories. It's really, some of the stuff we come up with is crazy. That's just one example. You can show that there's no Jesuits in our church other ways. So anyway, they failed, and they passed. They're going to pass because they're already on track. So many things have gone right, gone their way, it's inevitable. Just like we say, our line is inevitable now. They've got the right Pope at the right time, he's doing all the right things, he understands what his objective is. So that's what's happening here. That's what Sister Effie was trying to show us, that here, what makes them fail is half and half. She had really strong language about poison in that drink. She was brave. So you've got half and half, and here it's just 100% correct. No half and half, not half right, half wrong, just 100% correct. Just conceptually at this level, and I haven't gone into any of the waymarks, if you either took a picture or went through the notes, you've got all the waymarks that she gave us. I think she was pretty much correct on everything. I didn't see anything wrong with what she was saying. When you come to this history, failure, and they pass. And it's this model that should direct us, because what we're doing is line upon line. I've already mentioned this. These people who tell you that you shouldn't study counterfeit currency, only study the true, crazy idea. I mean, you know, it's just totally wrong. The Bible says it's wrong. The Bible says Christ can't come until what happens? 2 Thessalonians. The man of sin is revealed. So who do you have to look for? You have to look for the man of sin. You need to know how he operates, how he works. And how long does he work for? Sorry? Someone said? 1260. 1260 is 3.5 times 3.5 years. How long did Christ minister for? 3.5 years. So you see the same scenario, the same dynamics all being set up. You have to study the counterfeit. God's giving us a lot of information in the counterfeit histories that we're supposed to draw lessons from. So that's what she was trying to do. So then we said half right and half wrong. And in this study, she said it's 100% correct. Therefore, 2014 is a Sunday law. And this looks like my handwriting, but that's what she did because I asked her to explain it. And then I asked other people to explain it, and we weren't able to explain it. Some people weren't, even to their own satisfaction. So she mentioned fractals. So I said, okay, let's go into fractals and start discussing fractals. And it turns out that we're not all fully au fait with fractals and how they work. So the first thing I want us to see is fractals are tessellations. Think a tiled floor which has got these repeating patterns. That's one perspective of parables. It's fractals. It's not the only one. We've got a biblical quote for it. Esther chapter 1, verse 6. Brother Larry correctly identified that floor in its patterns is a tessellation, therefore is a fractal. So we have a hard proof text for fractals in the Bible. And that's without looking at the prophetic application of all of what that means when it happens, because that's critical for us to know, because the verse is introduced in a certain history, which we didn't go into. So we're looking at fractals now and seeing how they operate. So we had people trying to give examples. What I want us to see is when you work with fractals, you have to work with two concepts. One of them is that these are unique, separate and distinct waymarks. They're not the same waymarks. That's one principle. The other one is that they have characteristics or properties which are the same. That's number two. When you combine them together, you get this complexity that we've put on this board here that says 2014 is a Sunday law, and whatever date that is, it's a Sunday law. So it says Sunday law, and we need to be able to reconcile what we're doing and understand what we're doing. To begin with, 2014 is not a Sunday law. It's its own unique, distinct waymark. That was concept one. Concept two, it shares the same properties or characteristics. So the properties or characteristics about 2014, Sister Effie gave us one. GC 608 paragraph 2, I think. The characteristic that she gives is a demonstration of two classes that separate. She's identifying it at the Sunday law, and then she says the same thing happened in 2014. That's one characteristic. There could be others. She gave us one. And so that begins to open up the possibility to say 2014 is a Sunday law without it being Sunday and without it being a law. It has properties or characteristics. So hopefully we're beginning to get some idea, some concept of how fractals are working. And so before we do that, I want to just do another quick example of this. And Brother James is going to do this for us, if you're okay too. Yeah? Great. He's going to give, he can talk. Whatever you need to do. We've got 30 minutes max, so if it's 30 minutes, or if it's 15 or 10, whatever, however long it takes.
Well, it shouldn't take too long. You shouldn't really need to prove it. So I was thinking about it, trying to figure out a simpler way of showing what a fractal is. And what are we told about the rain, the early and latter rain from Spirit of Prophecy?
No, but they're broken up in two phases.
Okay, there's two phases,
Of
right?
Each of them, yes.
When's the first phase? The disciples' time, right? We got the early rain in the time of the disciples. When's the latter rain?
In our time.
Okay, can we say the end of the world? Right? End of the world. So, the beginning of the line, end of the line, latter rain. This is a time period that the rain is falling. I'll read one quote. It's Acts of the Apostles 54.2, just for one thing. It says, to the end of time, the presence of the Spirit is to abide with the true church. It's talked about the early rain started pouring out in the disciples' time. It says to the end of time, the Spirit's going to abide with the church. But at the end of time, there's going to be a special outpouring, a larger outpouring. So the rain's going to be here the whole time, in essence, right? But it comes in two phases. So when we look at the disciples' time, so that's just going to be this one little waymark, right? I'm just going to draw it at this. This is going to be blown up where it's a little bit bigger, right? We also see the early rain was broken up into two segments. Do we know when the first segment came? On the day of the resurrection, when Christ met with his disciples, it says he breathed on them. We're all familiar with that or not familiar with it? Okay, so I'll give a text just so we're familiar. I think it's John 20, verse 22. It says, Jesus breathed on them in the Spirit. Right? So in this period, we see it is breathing on them sound like a lot or a little?
A little.
Sounds like a little bit, right? So we have here at the beginning, in essence, the first rain, or the first beginning part of the early rain, we have a rain. And then, when do we see the second rain during the time of the disciples? At Pentecost. And it says it's an outpouring, right? Acts 2, 1 through 4, it says there was a sound of a rushing wind. When you think of breathing, or you sound of a rushing wind, which sounds smaller, which sounds bigger?
Rushing wind sounds bigger.
Right, rushing wind versus me breathing, right? So we see an example of the latter rain here. I mean, a larger outpouring, which is what we were told here. Spirit of Prophecy tells us it's going to begin here, and it goes to the end. Now, if we look at this period here, I'm going to do one more line here, and going through here, but we're going to blow up this one. And so technically, we're going to make this come over here. Right? Does everybody understand what I did? I made this line bigger. I made this line bigger. This waymark bigger. This waymark bigger. I blew it up. Here, we say that the early rain began to fall when? 9/11. All right? And when do we say the latter rain is going to fall? Loud cry. Okay, is that okay with everybody? So we have this, in essence, grew to a bigger point. When we first read about this, we don't notice that this is actually a period. Right? We don't know that this is actually a period of time. But by looking at it as a fractal, and we blow it up and look at all the, when we blow it up, we get to magnify it, we get to see what information is sitting here that was here before, but we didn't know it. Does that make sense? Does that help anybody with an understanding of fractals? Is that a work?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? No questions.
No questions? Brother David, no questions on that? Good? So we're okay with that example of fractals. Hopefully we're okay with this now, about what Sister Effie was trying to do.
I just have a question.
Mhm.
That word I keep tripping over. So I don't know what it means. What is a dispensation?
Dispensation. So let's pull up a dictionary definition of it to begin with. As we're doing that, if I were to ask you from age to age, what would that mean to you?
Period of time. But without it, I don't see a beginning or an ending in that.
Okay, so if I said the age of reason, probably heard a term like that.
Well, I haven't heard that term.
Okay. So age to age is periods of time. Okay, somebody found dispensation?
The biblical term, I mean, there's several definitions, but the one that applies biblically, I would say, is a divinely ordained order prevailing at a particular period of history.
Divinely ordained.
Order.
Okay, so it's some kind of system or order of religion that comes about in a certain history or a certain period of time. Give an example. These are approximate time periods. We'll mark the cross here and we'll mark the end of the world. Well, I'll just mark the beginning and the end without defining what they are. With respect to the church, what dispensation is this after the cross? What kind of a church do we have?
New Testament.
A New Testament church. So we'll call this the New Testament church, and therefore before the cross it was. So that was the Old Testament. So if we go with that definition again, and just plug into that definition these concepts.
Read it with those concepts, or just read it again?
Read it again, and then if you can plug it in with the concepts, that would be great. Just read it clean as it is.
A divinely ordained testament period, or testament prevailing at a particular history.
Okay, so that was the definition as given.
No.
Oh, give the definition as given.
Divinely ordained order prevailing at a particular period of history.
So order and particular history. So a particular period of history. So here's a particular period of history. So if you do it with this one,
It's a divinely ordained order.
you can put New Testament. Are you able to do that?
A dispensation is a divinely ordained order. A divinely ordained group prevailing at the New Testament era. That's all I've read later.
Okay. So this dispensation, we'll say is. We could put 31, I'll put 0 AD, there is no 0, and it goes all the way to the end of the world, which is in the 2000s. Yeah? So it's a 2,000-year-old dispensation, and it's the dispensation of the New Testament church, or we might call it Christianity. They were first called Christians in Antioch. You okay with that? So this is the dispensation of Christianity, and this is the dispensation of what? Because we weren't Christians before that. Judaism. Okay, so we've got the Christians and the Jews. We could do it that way. Is this Israel? Yeah, so this is the dispensation of Israel. What's this the dispensation of then? Israel. So it's Israel and Israel. This is spiritual Israel, and this would be literal Israel, literal spiritual. This would be ancient Israel. This would be modern Israel. So can you see you're juxtaposing? So dispensation just means a period of time that is set apart or demarcated for something to happen, a group to come into existence, to do their thing. So dispensations would be here on this statue. 1, 2, 3, 4 dispensations. Dispensation of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. 4 dispensations. The last dispensation is in 2 parts: legs of iron, feet of iron and clay. So you've got 4 dispensations, and the last one is in 2 parts: 4A and 4B. So you technically have 5 dispensations. Okay with dispensations? Great. Any questions on fractals?
I have a question on fragments, but I just had a clarification on progression. I think we had said that we cannot have typology and repeat on a line within a line. That's correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and then you were saying something in the line of progression, we cannot have repeat on the large and typology. Is that correct also?
When you say also, are you still saying the same thing? Or did I...
No, as in, is that the same?
What's the first thing you said?
So you can have typology within a line.
Okay, so you can't have topology within a line, and the second statement was?
In a line of progression, you can have.
Okay, so
I'm not sure what was set up.
so a line and a line of progression are the same thing. A line is a line,
Yes.
and what happens on the line is that you progress along it. So from my perspective, if we were to say a line or a line of progression, they're the same thing. Because if you say, oh look, I've got a line of progression, yeah? So I say I've got a line of progression here, a line of progression. So here, I've got a line, yeah? What is it a line of? Or is it just a line?
Progression is progressing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
when you read it, it seemed to me that you were doing a tautology and saying the same thing twice. You said on a line you cannot have typology, and then you said on a line of progression you cannot have typology. But
I hadn't finished the part about, I hadn't finished the second sentence because I left it as ... because I was trying to figure out what the point was, if you were trying to say the same thing again in a different way so we get it, or if it was a different point totally. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because in the line of progression you can have typology, yes, you can have a line. So the reason why that came up was because of what we were trying to explain. So I guess my question is it dependent on what we're trying to explain is when we will show progression to make the point, or we would demarcate it and use the line upon line to show the point? Do you understand what I'm saying, or do you want me to say it again?
again, I'm
Okay,
lost.
so we were saying how when she was giving her explanation in the morning, we thought she was doing line upon line. But in
Okay.
essence, what she was truly showing was progression. And I believe that was done to draw out the point, so we can see the different, I guess we call this distinction, but the markers which you have drawn them out on the board, fail, pass, or succeed, fail, pass. So she was trying to draw out our attention to saying that we don't fail, we pass by God's grace at the end. right? But that's to draw out that point. And so I'm saying now, maybe what other instances would you, let's say, use progression the way it was used to draw out this point to make other points? Because I mean, typically we would just, do the line upon line and make the points. And so I don't know if that was a fractal or if it's just a different way of explaining different points. I wanted to make that distinction.
I think we already discussed it. It was not a fractal.
Okay.
So what she did was not a fractal, and it's just a singular line. Yeah.
Okay. So okay, let me try to word it a different way. Why could we not have shown it as line upon line then?
You could have if you got a pair of scissors to it.
Okay, that's all I'm mentioning. You could do that.
And if you did that, what would you learn?
That's what I'm also asking.
What's the point of doing line upon line?
Compare, contrast. Show similarity, show differences, and this kind of thing.
So to show differences, you need to be really careful, because almost exclusively the reason we do line upon line is not to show differences, it's to show similarities. Because we all know that the history of Christ was nothing like our history. They don't have cars. I mean, over and over again, on multiple levels, there's many different contrasts. What we're trying to tease out of the line of Christ is what? Not contrasts. We're trying to tease out the similarities. Yeah? Because where's the time of the end in the line of Christ?
In the time of Christ was
The birth of John and Jesus. So that looks nothing like a 16-year-old boy who gets Cruden's Concordance. There's nothing related to them. So how do we go about going to the time of Christ and making their birth the time of the end? How do we go about doing that? Because we're not going to contrast the differences, we're going to forge our way through all those difficulties and try and find some similarities there. So the purpose of doing line upon line is to show similarities, not differences. That's the first thing that I want us to see. So if what Sister Effie had done, if she'd cut the line up and then she'd put the Millerites, the 1888 history and our history, if she was going to do line upon line, what would her task be? To show what?
Sorry, say that again?
If she'd cut the line up and put it line upon line, three histories, Miller's, 1888 and ours, what would the task be? What's the task when you do line upon line? What's the goal?
Line upon line to show the similarity.
To show the similarities. But her whole point was to show Millerites do half of it wrong and we don't do half of it wrong. So she would have been foolhardy to do line upon line, because it would have destroyed her point, because it's not a line upon line, it's a line that teaches you you fail, and then how are you going to put that on top of a line that teaches you that you're going to pass? That's not a line, that's not even line upon line. When you do a line of failure and a line of success, that's not what we do line upon line for. The whole purpose of line upon line is to show what? That they're the same, not that they're different. So she has to go to another line to show what? To show the similarities. She can't go to the Millerite line to show similarities because it's not.
Or from what she was trying to point out, yes.
It's not similar.
Yes.
She can't go to the 1888 because it's not similar. So she has to go to another line. What other line is similar to our line? The Pope's line, the counterfeit line, the Catholic line, that one is similar to ours. So she has to use a counterfeit line to make her point. Now, if her objective was something else, if her objective was the latter rain, that's what she wants to do. She could go to the Pope's line if she wanted to, but she could also go to the Millerite line, or the Millerite dispensation in the 1888, and then she could cut that line up, because she would be saying Millerites, Jones and us are all the what? Same or different? Our objective is to do lateral rain study. So we'll chop the line up and we say Millerites, 80 Jones and us. Can we do that? Because what would we be saying if we were to do that?
Showing how the ones that failed.
Lateral rain. Lateral rain.
Sorry again?
Lateral rain.
Yeah, lateral rain. Should be showing how, like, why it was half right and half wrong for those.
There's a lateral rain in the Millerite history. There's a lateral rain in Jones's history. And there's a lateral rain in our history. They're all the same. There's not differences. The lateral rain does the same thing in all three dispensations. Whatever it does might be slightly different, but it does the same thing. So you can do line upon line there, because it's not false, false. They didn't have a false lateral rain in those histories. It was true, true, true. So they're all the same. If you did false, false, true, it's not line upon line now, it's something else. So to make it, for it to work, she can't cut those lines, she can't cut the line up, she has to have a singular line, and there's 3 events on that. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. It becomes quite difficult to juggle some of these things around until you kind of walk through them. So it's not, I don't think it's intuitively obvious. Because if you go to most people, they ask the question, why can't you go back to the Millerite history? Because it's not intuitive. You really have to look at it and work out what the issue is. Yeah? Many of us will are and will continue to be tripped up on this issue about half right and half wrong, because they can't understand why you can't go back to the Millerite, because it's been drummed into them. The Millerite line is our line. It's our template. It is in certain situations, in certain characteristics. But now we're saying, let's go to popes. And they're the template for us. And you think, well, how can you do that? In a certain specific study, they are the template. So, yeah. So, I'm going to not finish this. So we'll go to a line, and it begins in 1798, and this is the line that Spirit of Prophecy gives us. Could call it the line of the Great Controversy, the line of what Spirit of Prophecy gives us. It begins in 1798. When does it end? Much further.
When Jesus.
Second Advent. So I didn't give it wasn't a good it wasn't a good question, because 1844 is the expected answer if I was doing that. So it was my bad. Shouldn't have done that. So this is the Spirit of Prophecy quote for the time of the end. Okay, so this is the time of the end. I just want to add something which is not germane to this. This here is at. If you're okay with that? At the time of the end. This is in the time of the end. So we've got at the time of the end, in the time of the end. All I want to draw out from this is the time of the end is a point or what we would call a waymark. And the time at the end is also a period of time. We're okay with that? So, if we're okay with that, Daniel 12:1 begins with what phrase? Without looking, without looking, without looking.
Depends on what version.
Which version? Which version you working with, my brother? Sister Wendy? And at that time. Okay, it says and at that time. So my question is, Brother Douglas, what time is that referring to?
When Michael stands up, and at that time shall Michael stand up.
Yeah, so what time? You can't say Michael stands up, that's not. It says Michael stands up at that time. So I want to know what the time is.
At the close of probation.
I don't think you can do that. Sister Wendy. And at the time of the end, Michael shall stand up. We okay with that? So Michael doesn't stand up here. The verse 40 says, and at that time, and Daniel 12:1 says, at that time. Okay? So we're here. Daniel 12:1. So the time that it's referring to when it says at is the time of the end. It's a specific waymark in that history. Want us to see that? That's got nothing to do with what we're studying. So let's put the Sunday law and the close of probation. In fact, the close of probation is the waymark that we were just looking at. So this is Spirit of Prophecy. What are all the waymarks that Spirit of Prophecy is going to give to us? I've given you 4 already. Which other ones?
1989.
Ellen White's going to give us 1989?
Oh, sorry, Spirit of Prophecy. Sorry.
Ellen White's going to give us 9/11?
Yes, she talks about the battle line falling and she progressively goes ahead to describe the standard law and Jacob's trouble
Okay.
from testimonies to the church.
Okay, so tomorrow you're going to give us 2014, and tomorrow can you give us the quote that she's going to highlight 9/11 for us? Yeah, you find the quote for us. Tomorrow's our last full day, so we'll see how much we can get through. What other waymarks? 1844. Any others? What I'm not looking for is all these ones that we've got here, because we've already got them there. Some of them Ellen White gives, some of them she doesn't. Pioneers give some. Pioneers. So there's a stack here. I'm not trying to populate that. So we've got 1798, October 1844, the Sunday law, close of probation. This is Daniel 12:1, obviously, the second Advent. Anything else? 1850. Let me put 63. Anything else?
What are you asking by what does she give us?
Just the waymarks that she identifies.
In her book, in her writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's here.
Loud cry.
Sorry? Latter rain? Where do you want to put that? Or I'm asking, where did she put it? My question is, where did she put it?
Never mind, on this line it's the same as the last.
Okay, so we'll pick this up tomorrow. We're going to rub this off for the next class. So if you just remember that we've done this, then we'll try and redraw that out tomorrow when we get a clean board. So we're looking at the waymarks that Ellen White gives to us. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and thanks for your goodness and mercy. We want to ask and pray for a continued blessing upon this school, for those who have organised the school, and particularly for the students who are here. May each of us think and meditate upon why you have brought us here, what we need to learn, unlearn, what you're trying to show us. We ask and pray for this enlightenment in Jesus' name. Amen.